A reading from the book of Genesis, chapter 2, verse 24. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh.
Do you have a smartphone? Would you like to follow today's message? Get the YouVersion Bible app. Simply search for a live event. Enter your zip code. You can follow the notes, read deeper into the text, and watch all the videos. Because when it comes to today's message, we have an app for that.
I'm sorry. One of the best parts about being a dad is that you get to play with your kids' toys. All right? Are there any parents out there who, like me, love to play with their kids' stuff? Whether they are around or not around. I mean, it's kind of fun to play with like their Legos. And right now, Benjamin at the age of 3 and Aurora at the age of 5, we're really starting to get into Legos in our household. I, of course, love it because when I was growing up, I had like just about every single kind of castle Lego there was. I thought I probably had all the pirate Legos that I could ever want and play with. I had all the town Legos that I wanted to play with and boats and fancy things. And it was just so much fun to take these toys out and to play with them. And so, of course, now that my kids are older, I love to play with their Legos. Unfortunately, I forgot to bring Benjamin's Legos today, so I found these around the church somewhere. So if these are your Legos and you want to claim them after the service, you can go ahead and I'm sure I'll leave them on the table here, so help yourself. Legos are a lot of fun. What's kind of cool about them is that they're interchangeable, right? Like you don't always have to follow the directions. You don't always have to build it exactly the way it is. You can mix and match things. I mean, because if there's anything that the Lego movie taught us, is that not everything needs to be nice and neat and compartmentalized, right? I mean, really, this was like a whole new realization to me because when I was a kid, if I wanted to play with my castle Legos, I pulled out my castle Legos. I played with my castle Legos. If I wanted to play with the pirate Legos, I put the castle Legos away and pulled out the pirate Legos. And the same with the town Legos, right? Because like you don't mix them. But in today's world, I mean, you can be creative, you can mix and match, you can do all kinds of fun things. Just let your imagination run wild. Go ahead and experiment and try things. And well, I suppose some of you are wondering, like, what in the world does Legos have to do with our message, right? What does Legos have to do with our relationship series? Well, I was thinking about this message today, and I realized when it comes to our relationships, a lot of times we approach relationships the same way we approach Legos, right? That they're fun and they're interchangeable and you can mix and match and you can do all kinds of neat things and be creative. And so, I mean, things are starting to get a little bit uncomfortable now. I'm not here today to beat you up over whether or not you've played with Legos or whether or not you've mixed or matched Legos or if you kept them nice and neat and separated. I'm not here to judge you for your past relationships. But instead, I want to take a look at our text today, our key text today, and try to understand what did God intend for us? What did God intend for our relationships, for our marriages, for our dating relationships, our engagements, or just even our friendships? What did God intend for us as a church, and what kind of commitments are we making to one another? Well, I'm Pastor Gordon. I'm the campus pastor at the Elko New Market campus, and today Pastor Paul is preaching down in Elko for me and covering the service there, and we thought it would be kind of a cool idea to exchange pulpits, and so if you're missing some of your friends today, they didn't skip church. They might have gone down with Paul to support our Elko New Market campus. I'm excited to be here and to share this relationship series, this Relationshops, as we've been going through. And today we're going to look at Genesis 2:24 to see God's intentions for our relationships. Genesis 2:24, as was read, said, "For this reason a man will leave his father and mother." There is hope if you have children living at home, right? It says, "This reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united with his wife, and the two will become one flesh." Our text reminds us quite simply that there's transitions that take place in our relationships and in our lives, right? That whether you realize it or not, parents, your kids aren't always going to live at home, okay? So there is hope that eventually one day we hope, maybe when they're 45, they'll eventually move out of the basement and be on their own, right? Kids, someday you're going to find that person of your dreams. You're going to stand maybe in a church or outside or some beautiful venue, and you're going to have a wedding, and you're going to exchange some vows, and you're going to make a commitment to somebody, a commitment that you want to spend the rest of your life with them. We're looking at this commitment today. And I believe, unfortunately, when it comes to our key text, that a lot of times, maybe this text has been misinterpreted. Because a lot of times, and I'll admit, maybe when I was younger and I was dating, I kind of had this idea that, I got to find that person of my dreams, like the right person out there, right? Like there's a right one for you. And if you don't find that right one, well then, your life is just going to be miserable, right? Some of you are probably smiling to yourselves thinking, I thought I found the right one, and my life still is miserable, right? But we have this false idea that if only we find the right person, then that somehow that person is going to complete us. That somehow that person will make us whole. But I think that's the lie that we've bought into. Maybe as a culture, maybe as society, and we think, oh man, we've got to find that right person that's going to complete us. Well, I have here a bolt. And as I was preparing for this message today, I was looking over some of Pastor Garth's materials for a book that he's working on, and he shared this illustration in his book, and he says, guys, it's kind of like this. You are a bolt. Now, a bolt in and of itself is a complete bolt, right? It's whole, it's not missing anything, it's got the threads, it's got everything it needs to function as a complete bolt, all right? Ladies, guess what? You get to be the nut, all right? If you got a problem with this, don't take it up with me, take it up with Pastor Garth. It's her sermon illustration, all right? But ladies, you get to be the complete nut, all right? And it's designed, it's whole, it can function completely just fine as the nut it is, right? Now, God has already made you complete. And so why don't you go ahead and remind your neighbor of that by turning to somebody you're sitting close to and let them know you are a complete bolt or you are a complete nut, all right? So go ahead and turn to your neighbor. Somebody mentioned to me that after the first service, they said, you have affirmed what I have known to be true and have believed all along. And his wife said, what was that? That I married a complete nut. So if that's you, Pastor Paul will be back in a little while this afternoon. So if you'd like to set up a counseling appointment, you are more than welcome to do so, all right? But somewhere along the way, we've bought into this lie, believing that there's got to be somebody out there that's going to complete us. And in the video illustration that was shown before this message, in the movie The Son, I think Rose kind of bought into that lie. She had found this person, this man of her dreams. It's this love story. They fall madly in love and they get married and everything's going to be perfect, right? And Jed Keane, the main character, he writes this song for his wife, this beautiful song, which launches him into stardom. And soon the tours go from being just maybe a few weeks to a few months. And a few months stretches out to a half a year and so forth, where it gets to the point where it seems like, well, he just comes home for conjugal visits. And they wonder what's happening to their relationships and things are not going well. And the more time he spends away, and the more that Rose has this emptiness and this longing inside of her, the more they begin to drift apart. Until finally, Jed hits rock bottom. He overdoses on some drugs, and he finds himself in the hospital. And Rose comes to this realization that her husband can't complete her. That there's got to be something more, something beyond finding fulfillment in a person. And she begins to seek out and to find her fulfillment in God. God has already made us whole and complete. I mean, you are complete as you are, but God has also designed us to be a part of a team. And it's when we come together, when we make that commitment together that says, yes, we are equals. Yes, I want to partner with you. Yes, I want to spend my life with you. That we're able to serve and fulfill the purposes of the nut and the bolt together. We can do and hold things together and do amazing things. See, you were designed to be a part of a team. The text continues on in verse 25. The author of Genesis says that the man and his wife were both naked and they felt no shame. Now, you might say, well, they feel no shame because this is before the fall, right? I mean, this is before anybody has messed up. But, I mean, even if you and I never had any grievances in between us, I still wouldn't feel comfortable standing before you, right? I mean, I preached a sermon in my gym shorts once as a sermon illustration, and I felt completely naked. I don't know how Keanu did it, where he was posting, what did Paul post, a picture of him preaching with his shirt off? I don't know how he could do something like that. I just feel totally naked and exposed because, well, we don't have that kind of relationship, right? But in what I read in the text here is that Adam and Eve understood this commitment. They understood that they were together, that they were a part of a team. They understood that they were in union with one another. And so when I read this text, it's not so much about being naked or not, but it says to me that they could be completely vulnerable with one another. They could be completely honest and vulnerable and hide nothing from one another. And the reason they could do that is because they understood this commitment that they had. They understood this foundation that their relationship was built upon. Jesus takes us even a step further. And he says, when he's asked about marriage, he quotes this text from Genesis, and then he says, what God has joined together, let no one separate. What God has joined together, let no one separate. I love how Andy Stanley, a well-known communicator, puts it. He says, don't unone what God has won. In other words, if God has brought you together, if you have made a commitment, a promise to someone, then don't unone what God has won. Don't undo what God is bringing together. Don't undo what God is doing in your life. When I hear this phrase, when I hear this verse, it makes me think of this. All right, Gordon, don't get in your own way, right? Don't mess this up. And guys, I don't know about you, but I'm particularly good about this, right? Getting in my own way, messing things up, making the relationship messy. And yet, to say don't unone what God has won is more about an attitude, a commitment that we make to one another. Whether it's in our marriage, or maybe you're engaged or dating or single, wherever you may find yourself, we can live out this commitment, not to unone what God has won. And so maybe you're here today and you're sitting next to your spouse, or you're thinking about your own marriage and kind of evaluating, and I'm not sure where you're at. I'm not sure what your story is or where you have been, but maybe you're hearing these words today and saying, you know what? For me, it means I'm going to fight for my marriage. That I'm not going to just give up. I'm not going to surrender or get in my own way, but I believe my marriage is worth fighting for. And so I'm going to fight for my marriage. I'm going to fight for my kids. Maybe you're not quite married yet. You're recently engaged or thinking about proposing, and you're hearing this message and you're thinking about, wow, what does this mean for me? Well, maybe for you it's identifying what are those things that might get in the way of my relationships. What are those things about my past that I need to let go of? What are those things that I've been hanging on to, and it's time to surrender them and to focus on how I can be in union with somebody, how I can join my life and to work as partners, as a team with this person. Maybe you're just dating, right? And you're not quite sure if he or she is the person of your dreams yet. For you, it means not jumping ahead. Not racing ahead or putting the cart before the horse. It means evaluating your relationships and making sure, guys, to guard her heart, to not lead her on, to not lead her astray. And ladies, for you to be true to the person that God has created you to be. And to not buy into this lie that somehow he is going to complete you and fulfill all your dreams, because ask any other married couple here today, and I'm sure the wives will tell you he's going to mess up, right? But how do we find that wholeness in ourselves before we are engaged or married? Maybe you're here today and you're single and you're thinking, well, man, this is depressing. We're doing this relationship series and I don't have anybody in my life. And so how does this message apply to me? Well, it means taking the time to really focus on being that person that God has called you to be. To really focus on yourself and the wholeness and being and realizing that God has made you complete just as you are, that you don't need somebody else to complete you. Or maybe you're here today and you're kind of on the other end of the spectrum, right? You've lived your life, you found your one. Maybe you had some of the best days. You celebrated 50 years of marriage together, or maybe you thought you found the right one. But then through a tragedy, through an illness, through death, maybe through a divorce, those dreams were crushed and broken. And for you, hopefully today you can hear a message of healing and a message of hope. And to recognize that how God's grace is at work in your life. And to realize that you have wisdom that you can share with the rest of us. If you made it even 10 years, 25 years, 50 years, you have wisdom that you can share with the rest of us on how we can make our marriage a marriage worth fighting for, how we can make our relationship with our kids a relationship where our kids know that we love and support them, and how we can focus on being the complete person that God has called us to be. Because wherever we are at in our lives, we can live out this commitment. We can be focused not to unwon what God has won. When I think about this message, it's not just in terms of relationships between a man and a woman, but I think of it also in terms of a relationship as a church. Because as a community, we have gathered together around a common vision, a common mission, purpose, and goal, right? We said we want to become a biblically functioning community of believers. And when I say that, I'm not talking about, well, we got to follow every rule and letter of the law. No, I'm saying to become a biblically functioning community like we find described in Acts chapter 2, where we care for one another, where we support one another, where we encourage each other to grow in our faith. That's what we want to become. We have a saying here at Crossroads Church, one church, many locations. And I don't know what you think about when you hear that, but for me, I think about the fact that we are a network, that together we can do more for God's kingdom than any one of us can do on our own. Because the reality is I need you, right? Not just as a church plant. I am so grateful that I'm not just starting this church in Elko New Market completely on my own and going out there and just knocking on doors and it's just me and a handful of others, but I'm working with a community that supports me, a community that encourages me. And I can have instant credibility in the community when I say, I'm a part of Crossroads Church. And they go to our website and they see, wow, they've got campuses in Inver Grove Heights and Minneapolis and Lakeville. And wow, this church must be legit. This church must take their commitment to their communities seriously. I'm excited to be a part of that because I realize that I need you. But I also realize that you need me and that we need one another. Because when we put our energy and our focus and our time and attention together, we can accomplish so much more for God's kingdom than any one of us can do on our own. Let me come back to the Legos, if I might. If this time changing maybe the illustration, the metaphor a little bit. Now, one of the things that is kind of cool about Legos is that you don't have to keep everything nice and neat and follow the instructions, right? You can use your imagination, you can use your creativity to build and do all kinds of cool things. Sometimes I might look at the picture in the box and I'll try to recreate it, but for some reason mine never turns out quite as good, right? Sometimes you can mix and match and you can come up with all kinds of amazing things. But I realize that I'm not the master builder, right? I understand Anna might be a master builder with her robotics team. I guess she's pretty good with Legos and putting together some Lego robotics, and they qualified, the Lakeville North High School qualified for Worlds. Is that what I heard correctly? So maybe she is a little bit more of a master builder than I am, but I realize that, you know what? When it comes to this whole relationship thing, sometimes I'm a little messy. But God is the master builder. And I believe God has a plan for my life. And I believe God is able to do and transform my relationships, my commitments to do some pretty amazing things. I believe that God has placed me where I'm at for a reason, in my home, in my community, in this church. And for me, I'm always thinking about where is it that God is at work? And how is it that God desires to use me? Because I believe when we all do this, when we all are focusing on what God wants to accomplish in and through us, well, that's when we can do some pretty amazing things. By allowing God to be the master builder of our lives, to be the master builder of our relationships. And so I'm not sure where you're at today, but wherever we are, we all can make that commitment to our spouses, that commitment to our boyfriend or girlfriend or fiance, that commitment to our children or our friends, that commitment as a church. Are you willing to allow God to be the master builder of your life? Are you willing to commit to not unwon what God has won? Are you willing to live that out? To let nothing come in the way of God's desires and purposes for your life? And to be solely focused on what he wants to do and accomplish? Are you willing to commit to one another as a church? To live this out as one church in many locations, supporting and encouraging one another and helping work together to build up God's kingdom here on this earth? Let us pray. God, we thank you for your word. We thank you for your encouragement. We thank you for your hope. I thank you for this community and the ways that we can support and encourage one another, challenging each other to grow deeper in our relationship. Lord, we confess that we have not always lived to your desires or your intentions. God, we've made mistakes, and we confess and we ask for your forgiveness. We say we're sorry. But Lord, help us this day to live out our commitments, to live out in faithful obedience to your desires and to your word for our lives. For we pray all this in your name. Amen. In a few moments, the ushers are going to come forward to wait upon you for your gifts, your tithes, and your offerings. And during the special